Today we're going to be looking at another one of Kurzgesagt's videos. This one is called "The Internet is Worse Than Ever. Now What?" That is a terrifying looking thumbnail. Note that I do not see the symbol for YouTube present. Pretty sure I know why. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tyler Folse. I'm a nuclear engineer with a little over 10 years of experience in the commercial nuclear power industry, from engineering to operations to emergency response. I don't claim to know everything there is nuclear, but I can certainly share some knowledge. Let's get right into it.
In 2022, nearly half of Americans expected a civil war in the next few years. 1 in 5 now believes political violence is justified. And it's not...
They mean a literal shooting civil war, or just like a war of ideology, like a war that isn't necessarily fought in a battlefield? I wasn't aware of that.
The US, but around the world, people increasingly see themselves as part of opposing teams. There are many different reasons for this, but one gets blamed a lot: social media. Social media divides us, makes us more extreme and less empathetic. It riles us up or sucks us into doom scrolling, making us stressed and depressed.
Now, is it the social media that does it, or is it just our own natural wiring in social media making it a little bit more convenient than it used to be back in the day? I'm thinking it's number 2.
It feels like we need to touch grass and escape to the real world. New research shows that we might have largely misinterpreted why this is the case. It turns out that the social media internet may uniquely undermine the way our brains work, but not in the way you think. The myth of the filter bubble. You've probably heard about online filter bubbles. Algorithms give you exactly what you want or what they think you want. You only see information that shows you opinions that agree with yours, while dissenting opinions or information are filtered out. Since you only see content close to your worldview, more extreme and toxic opinions suddenly seem less extreme.
I knew about, like, it clicks, like, for instance, YouTube's algorithm. When you click on a video, it's going to recommend similar stuff because that's what it thinks you like. So if you click on more of my videos, YouTube's going to recommend more of my stuff. Thought I'd throw that up.
You're trapped in a radicalizing filter bubble, and your view of the world becomes narrower and more extreme. But is that true? Extreme filter bubbles seem to be rather rare. Studies that investigated what people actually look at online or are shown by search engines found little evidence that they are ideologically isolated. It's the exact opposite. Online, you are constantly confronted with opinions and
just see the radioactive barrel symbol? Yeah, there's a lot of toxic stuff out there, pun intended, about radioactivity. That isn't true. One of the main purposes of my channel is to debunk a lot of that.
Views that are not your own. It turns out that the place where you are the most ideologically isolated is your real life, in the real world, with real people. Your real-world interactions with your friends, family, colleagues, and neighbors are much less diverse than your online bubble. The filter bubble exists in your real life, not online. Okay, wait. Online filter bubbles have been the prevailing explanation as to why we've all started hating each other more over the last 2 decades. If that's not the case, shouldn't the internet open our minds and make us more empathetic with each other? Unfortunately, your brain is stupid. Your brain is stupid. Human brains didn't evolve to understand the true nature of reality, but to navigate and maintain social structures. Our ancestors desperately needed each other to survive, so our brains had to make sure we cooperated. That's why social isolation or exclusion feels so horrible, because it was actually life-threatening.
Can you imagine if we had the internet for that long? Like, if it existed during this time period, I don't think no one would know how to use it, and yeah, none of the support technologies would make any sense. But so maybe the internet's a bad thing, but just some communication style that would be the equivalent of scrolling through. It could be all telepathic or something. But if we had something like that, that would be, if anything, that could actually be too foreign that we'd be unrecognizable at this point.
A tribe that worked together survived. A divided tribe died.
Yep.
The way communities worked for thousands of years is that, sure, you may have disliked a neighbor, but because you lived close to each other, you also rooted for the same sports club or saw them at church. You both thought that the people from the other village were idiots. Being physically close made you familiar and created similarities that bridge the gap of different worldviews, so you...
Now that's interesting. I mentioned about professional sports. A lot of it is based on like, oh, I'm going to pull for whatever city I happen to be in, and whatever city that the other team is from, well, they're stupid. So it's silly how we do this, but there is this primal thing in our brains. It's kind of funny.
Didn't murder each other. And your worldview was probably not that different in the first place because it was formed by the same local culture. When our brains evolved, this was enough. Whoever was around was similar to us. We liked what was similar to us. This kept us aligned enough to work together despite our differences. As humanity moved on from small tribes to towns and cities, from chiefdoms to kingdoms to nations, our brains and our communities had to adapt to more diverse sets of neighbors. We began to meet on the town square or in universities where we argued and screamed at each other. But in the grand scheme of things, communities were still relatively isolated, we were still pretty similar and aligned with the people around us. Conflict and disagreement
You can kind of see it as like concentric circles, like each group of people more related, and then you have kind of varying levels of people inside your like community level circle and then like your national level circle. Well, back then the idea of a nation state was a little different, but either way.
Not a bad thing per se. Tension over how we should live can create new and wonderful things. Our values, norms, and taboos are always evolving, and whatever we think is normal today will not be normal in the future. But we also need social glue to hold our societies together because our brains don't care about the meta level of humanity, but about being safe in a tribe. Until about 20 years ago, we did something truly new that hit our brains like a freight train. The social media internet, the digital town square. Don't you dare disagree with me. Social sorting. In a nutshell, our brains are not able to process the amount of disagreement we encounter on the social internet. The very mechanisms that made it possible for our ancestors to work together in the first place are derailed in ways we were not prepared for. Whether you want it to or not, your brain sorts people by worldviews and opinions into teams. This is not simply tribalism, it goes further. Researchers have called this process social sorting. On the digital town square, you encounter people that express opinions or share information that clash with your worldview.
So what's interesting is this one, the bin is green and the little symbol is yellow. I've seen it the other way around. I wonder if that's intentional that Kurzgesagt did it that way. But yeah, the fears of nuclear waste, let's see, it's being lumped in with a gun, and that's supposed to be celery or a lentil or something. Not sure what that's all about.
But unlike your neighbor, they don't root for your local sports club. You're missing the local social glue your brain needs to align with them. For your brain, the disagreement between yourself and them becomes a central part of their identity. And this makes it less likely that you will seriously consider their position or opinion in the future. If you hear bad things about them, your brain is much more likely to believe it uncritically. On the flip side, there are people who share your worldview and are maybe even more similar to you than many people in your real life.
This whole groupthink mentality of basically, in these debates, not really being a civil exchange of discourse and just people wanting to be... These people are wanting to be understood more than they seek to understand, which can be a bit of a problem with debates, and both sides end up getting more entrenched in what they were rather than an actual true exchange of information. But I guess exchange of information wasn't really their goal. It was more to prove that one side is superior to the other. It's fascinating when you take a step back from it. And I'm no different. I am heavily biased, pro-nuclear, so I'm not going to pretend to be different than anyone else.
Which makes your brain like them a lot and kind of hyper-align with them. People who think like you are probably good people because you're a good person and whatever social group you belong to is good.
Yeah,
so your brain is more likely to believe their opinions. If you hear bad things about them, your brain is much more likely to dismiss it uncritically. The engagement-driven social internet makes it worse because it wants to keep you online as long as possible. And the most engaging emotion is, unfortunately, anger. The more angry you get, the more likely you are to share and engage. And this leads to social media amplifying the most extreme and controversial opinions. It optimizes not only to show us disagreement, but the worst disagreement possible. And because your stupid brain
That
is
was
sorting
cancel
people into
culture,
teams,
yeah.
whatever the worst opinions are, it assigns the same opinions to everybody on the other team. What's striking and new about online polarization is that all the aspects of our lives that make us individuals, our lifestyle choices, the comedians or shows we
I like that it's showing just a bunch of random, unrelated stuff being sorted into boxes, because this sort of thing happens and then that becomes like one group's defining characteristic over time, and it changes because then it's, you know, based on the next topic or what have you comes up, it's the us versus them just sticks you to a stance on one thing, when it's a shame that, but I can understand why we evolved that way, just to have that group affinity and loyalty for survival. But it focuses on just the one thing at the surface rather than how much both sides even have in common. Not to mention the flaw that there really is two sides to something, which is its own. Polarity by itself doesn't truly describe everything, but it's convenient because, like that goofy looking picture of the brain, it's easier for a person to understand.
our religion, sense of fashion and so on are condensed, making it seem that they're parts of
Giant
opposing
bacon
and mutually
burger.
exclusive identities.
That's a good point, because you can have giant bacon burgers that are organic.
Simplifies and distorts disagreements about how we should run society so much that it often seems as if the people on the other team are actively, willfully making the world worse. That they're almost evil, beyond convincing with rationality, facts or civil discussion. While you are, of course, on the correct team, it may be hard to process that you may seem like that to people on the other team. On a societal level, this is dissolving the social glue that's the foundation of our democracies. If we think our neighbors are evil, how can we live together? This is especially bad in the US, where the two-party system makes it extra easy to think of people in terms of teams. Negative opinion about the...
Yeah, so not a politician or political science expert, but the two-party things in the US can really throw someone off politics, because it's polarizing at its finest. Both sides, in order to be selected by their party, they have to appeal to the fringe. Now, I say have to. They don't really, but a lot of it feels that it's easier to appeal to that fringe to get that base and powerful support that you really need to have in order to have any chance of winning, to basically get the fate of the party. But someone who is more towards the center is now left with a choice of someone on opposite sides by the time two candidates are selected. You can see that if, for those of you who are not from the US, if you were to watch the primaries where each candidate on each side is selected, the more moderates, they typically don't last as long to the point where they actually get nominated. And that kind of goes back to, it's easier for our brains to see this one exaggerated quality and then just to see these two extremes on one side, the red and blue mentality. It's also interesting to see that extend its way into nuclear topics as well, like thorium versus uranium. It's not a mutually exclusive thing. There's so many designs that incorporate both, that incorporate one component of a thorium technology. It's usually the liquid sodium reactor technology, but you can have liquid sodium reactors without thorium. You could have thorium without liquid sodium reactors. But it's kind of, you'll even see this within between nuclear engineers, that it's this old technology that's been around for a while, that's reliable but old-fashioned, versus the new. And thorium's not really that new. It was more of just, it wasn't utilized for perceived supply reasons. Plus, at its infancy, nuclear was wanted to be both a weapons and energy program as well. And that's just kind of taken it to the extreme views of even both things. So yeah, you see this. The whole fission versus fusion thing, even though those technologies could actually play well together. It's interesting.
Party has reached record highs. Okay,
Angry
is there
face.
something we can learn from this? Is there something we can do? something more positive, opinion part. In the
Opinion
end,
part, here we
it's
go.
important to be aware of what social media does to your brain. It's easier to change yourself than to change the world, so you can self-examine why you believe the things you believe
Always
and
right.
whether you dismiss or believe information based on who the person is who is stating that information. The internet comes with a lot of ups and downs, and just like we had to adapt from living in small tribes to living in cities,
Wow.
we need to adapt to the information age where we have access to billions of people. Evolution is too slow, so we need to find models that work with what our brains are able to tolerate. One model that seemed to work well was the pre-social media internet old people might remember. Bulletin boards,
wow.
forums, blogs. The
Oh,
main
yeah,
difference
blogs.
to today was twofold. For one, there were no algorithms fighting to keep you online at any cost. At some point, you were done with the internet for the day, as mind-blowing as this may sound.
It's now
But
safe.
more
I remember
importantly,
that.
the old internet was very fractured, split.
What's interesting is those old computers and stuff like that, I've seen still used, like Windows 95. It's now safe to turn off your computer era portable computers, which are about as portable as a really big toolbox. Those are still used because the software quality assurance thing is such a rigorous process at a nuclear plant. I've seen those used to measure reactivity in a core at low power and do testing. I remember when I was a reactor engineer, we actually used something like that, and this wasn't that long ago. This was maybe 2015 when I did that, not 1995.
Thousands of different communities, like small villages gathering around shared beliefs and interests. These villages were separated from each other by digital rivers or mountains. These communities worked because they mirrored real life much more than social media. Each village had its own culture and set of rules. Maybe one community was into rough humor and soft moderation, another had strict rules and banned easily. If you didn't play by the village rules, you'd be banned. Or you could just go and move to another village that suited you better. So instead of all of us gathering in one...
What's interesting is, evolutionary speaking, there is this thing that the idea of being banned or exiled was kind of wired into us, that would be even worse than death. Because it's like, not only is that being exiled likely to lead to your death, but you and your line would not be thought to survive. And I'm talking about way in the, old tribal, prehistoric and relatively primitive time periods. But yeah, there's this primal fear in there about being the exile, being the outcast, because that goes beyond one's own life, which is crazy. And yet that kind of goes into when, for each, social media group, it can get kind of... Kurzgesagt is right. I believe that, we evolved slowly over thousands of years, but with the advent of this technology, those same impulses and emotions just aren't always evident of that same exile feeling when you get vote kicked from your favorite chat group. Yeah, it's a little different these days.
Overwhelming our brains at a town square that in the end just leads us to going insane. One solution to achieve less social sorting may be extremely simple. Go back to smaller online communities. Because what our stupid brains don't realize is that we are actually all on the same team. Humanity, on a wet rock speeding through space in a universe that doesn't think about us. We are all in this.
Universe that doesn't think about us? Oh, the Kurzgesagts, they're optimistic nihilists. I keep forgetting that sometimes. Can't say I agree with that, but that's beyond the scope of this video.
Together. But until our brains adjust to being able to deal with that, we might be better off being a tiny bit separated.
I don't know if that's a solution, though. I still don't think technology is the problem. It's more of it's just human nature at its core that can be exaggerated. But if they're saying just take a break, then yeah, I think taking a break is probably good for everyone, and not just for this reason. There's other health benefits. Anyways, let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.